Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, everybody, welcome to the show. It's Monday, it's the start of a brand new week, and it is getting closer and closer to the election. Oh, man. It's getting so close. So, as some of you might be pointing out, either the long nightmare is over, or it continues. Yikes. So, I may do a election special stream with a friend of mine. Maybe. That's if you're interested in watching it. That should be nerve-wracking. Incredibly nerve-wracking. Yikes. Ivy Evans filled in my mail-in ballot and hailed it in. Thank you. I appreciate that. Everybody, if you haven't voted already, please do so. Very, very important that you do. I know, I've also got a lot of foreign viewers, so disregard that. You know what I mean? But I realize a lot of you are rooting for us as well. And so in other countries. So I appreciate that. I do. Yes, Actus Magus is right. Lame duck session, even when and if he loses, they got to survive until January. This is true, yes, but at least, we'll be there. we'll be able to look forward to, at least eventually getting Donald Trump out of office. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. Who knows? That's the scary thing. Okay. But I'm already reading some of your comments, and they're fantastic. Metro says, UK and we'll watch with a bottle of spirits. We will all have have a bottle of spirits. We'll have a lot of spirits, too. The whole world is watching. And that'd be cool. No, I meant I have a live stream. That's kind of what I wish, you guys meant by the whole world is watching. But will we have a live stream? It is very possible that we will. So, very possible. Ravaging Wolverine over on Twitch here says, delivered my absentee ballot to my polling site 2 days ago. It was uncharacteristically crowded. That may be a good sign or might not be a good sign. I think that's a good sign. I like democracy. I think that, people voting is great. But that said, you know what I mean? Some people might be very enthusiastic for Donald Trump. Who knows? So we're just going to have to see how it shakes out. It's going to be one of those things where I'm pretty sure we're going to be freaking or flipping out, whatever noun you want to use, or descriptor, on election night because of the vote counts. We'll see what happens. Am I the only one who didn't drink over the last 4 years? I'm pretty sure a lot of Trump supporters probably didn't, to be fair. Let's see. S. Bloom, Void Queen, hello. Turning in your absentee ballot on Friday. I don't trust the mail to get it there. Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Absolutely. All right. Anyway, we do have a show today. We got some stories that I want to talk about. We've got White House. I keep going to Kevin McCarthy, but I keep thinking it's the same guy. It's not. It's Mark Meadows. And he's basically going to go and admit that the White House has given up. I know, right? Man, we've done nothing and we're all out of ideas. That's basically the White House response. But we'll talk about that anyway. We also have Republicans using alternative facts. It's a little bit more of a meta discussion on social media and quote unquote information. We also have Jared Kushner goes racist. We've got a no kidding study on what should have been done for COVID to avoid the rent-pocalypse. And then if we've got time for it, of course, the fate of over 500 children that were separated from their families. What happened to them? Turns out nobody knows. Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. This is what happens under Republicans. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's dive into the first story here. With over 220,000 Americans dead and COVID cases hitting new record highs, many Americans might be looking to the White House for answers. Unfortunately, they're not really going to find answers, but you are going to find this.
We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation areas.
Why aren't we going to get control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask?
Jake,
that's what the vice president's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this, is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments, to make sure that people don't die from this. But to suggest that we're going to actually quarantine all of America, lock down our economy.
No one's saying that.
Well, they are. Joe Biden's saying that. He says lock everybody down. We're going to have...
Okay. First of all, there's a lot in there. That's fun. So we'll go through it bit by bit. Well, we're not going to control this pandemic. Well, not with that attitude. I mean, come on. But seriously, though. Okay. So Republicans, this is Mark Meadows saying, we're not going to control the pandemic. But then goes on to say, we're going to try to mitigate the situation through social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but then you are going to try to control the pandemic. Then why didn't you say that in the first place? If you're trying to mitigate, that means you're trying to control the pandemic. That doesn't make any sense. You just literally contradicted yourself. But again, this is how it goes to how this is all political bullshit at this point, and why Republicans actually really don't care. Because he's saying, well, Joe Biden just wants to lock everything down. Well, that is part of controlling the pandemic. That's not the entire picture. Again, there's masks, there's social distancing, there is waiting for and working towards a vaccine. But part of what we need to do is to actually lock down. And so, unfortunately, you are not willing to do what is necessary to make sure that more people don't die. Because again, understand that if we don't do those measures, then we are going to see tens of thousands more people die. In fact, some of the most recent projections have it over 400,000 by February. So 400,000 people dead by February. But seriously, though, again, they don't want to do what's necessary because what that would do, again, is hurt their donors. Because it would involve giving American citizens money to not do anything. I know, right? Money for free. Could you imagine? I mean, giving those poor people, those undeserving wretches, money so they could sit home and not work? I do declare it is blasphemy. Oh, can't do it. So the alternative, of course, for the Republicans is to send you back to work so that you can either die or infect others. And look, in fact, the thing is, Republicans keep trying to shove, this provision into all of their relief bills. Okay, so this provision is the corporate liability provision. Okay, meaning that if your boss maintains an unsafe workplace and you are called back to work, okay, and so you're in an unsafe workplace, you've got no mask, no PPE, nothing like that. And if coronavirus spreads all over your workplace, as it's going to, well, and then, you get sick, you can't work, you lose your wages, or God forbid, you lose your family members, your job, whatever, and you rack up thousands of dollars in medical bills after you get coronavirus, and as a result, again, lose so much. At the end of all of that, if you survive, you will not be able to sue your employer for getting you infected with COVID. So that's what they're trying to ram into all of these bills. That's what Republicans want more than anything, is to protect their corporations, to protect corporate donors. All right? So now, to be fair, the Democrats also want to protect corporations. But to be fair, at the same time, to point out the reality of the situation, they do try to stop some of the most blatant, egregious stuff that the Republicans keep pushing for, while also pushing for a little bit of aid for regular people, including the $600 in unemployment benefits, the $1,200 checks, which would have been effective at least mitigating some of the economic damage that we're facing right now for regular people. And I say for regular people because middle America, upper middle class, wealthy people, corporations have actually been doing absolutely fantastic during this crisis. In fact, some of the richest Americans in the country, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, etc., have gotten even more wealthy to the billions of dollars during this pandemic. All right? And so, yes, Republicans want to do strictly corporate welfare and stuff for the rich, whereas Democrats also want to do corporate welfare stuff for the rich, but also at least give us a bone. I mean, corporate Democrats. Sure. Now, that said, Republicans are pushing herd immunity. The thing about herd immunity is that it doesn't work without a vaccine. Okay? And so far, I believe that we've gotten about, we're not even anywhere close to herd immunity, essentially. Okay, we've got about 7 million people, over about 8 million people that are now infected out of a country of about 340 million people. Just imagine the death toll if we had 95% of people, infected, right, to develop herd immunity without a vaccine. It would be a bloodbath, an absolute bloodbath. What they would do if we were to follow this, and this is pushed by Dr. Scott Atlas, who Donald Trump is continuing to listen to in the coronavirus task force, what it would do is it would cull the weak and the sick from the population, and as a result, also give people who are exposed to the virus, because there are people who have very negative reactions to the virus because it attacks the body so aggressively that people could end up with organ damage, lung damage, heart damage, kidney damage, all that different stuff, neurological damage as well. And it would create a new class of people with new pre-existing conditions, which, again, if Republicans have their way and they get rid of the ACA, thanks to Amy Coney Barrett, insurance companies would be allowed to kick them off their insurance plans. And so now you've got this entire group of people, tens of thousands, probably millions of people with herd immunity that would end up having this I mean, these pre-existing conditions, which they would not be able to afford to cover, who would have no insurance. So that would be millions of more people that would die prematurely as well. And so this is a problem. Okay, this is a problem. That is a lot of potential suffering and death. It's almost as if Republicans call themselves pro-life while simultaneously being the opposite of. But again, here it is. This is the admission. We're not going to do anything about it. We've kind of given up. And look, to be fair, they had given up before this. Now they're just publicly saying, yeah, we've done everything, or we've done nothing, and we're all out of ideas. What are we going to do? Give people money? Lock down the country? Mandate masks? No, we're not going to do any of that. And so we're out of ideas. Let's open up the country. That's what they're going to do. They don't care about people. We're not going to control this pandemic because, well, the Republicans say if you die, you die. That's it. They don't even care if their own die. Look at Herman Cain. Okay? I mean, they'll let their own die from the pandemic. They don't care. They don't care. And understand, this is not just Donald Trump's position. This is the official position of the Republican Party. So they all are in on it. They all agree. Or at least there are people, maybe there are people that don't agree in the White House. Maybe Republican staffers that are like, oh, I can't believe it. But they're still going along with it. They're still going along with it. I mean, as emergency physician Esther Chu points out, that this is, quote, it is what it is, wasn't a randomly tossed off phrase, it's the official policy of the Republican Party. And Mark Meadows, this is according to former advisor for Obama, Dan Pfeiffer, says Mark Meadows admits on camera 9 days before the election that the White House has given up on trying to control the virus that has killed more than 220,000 Americans, and of course it will kill more. Many more, even after the election is over, by the way. Even if Joe Biden wins, we're still going to lose tens of thousands of people as we try to control the virus. And if Trump wins, well, count on that death toll to be quite a bit higher. Absolute disaster. And it didn't have to be like this, by the way. Had President Trump done his job and the Republicans done their job to actually try to control this pandemic by doing what needed to be done and had their followers masked up and did social distancing, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. Unfortunately, well, we're here. Tomorrow phrase from Trump, it is what it is now, but it didn't have to be like this. And now it's up to us to make it, well, to try to pick the least bad option in November so that we could try to get at least a handle on this now. Okay. And I know some of you are saying Republicans pro-life. We know that they're not pro-life. I know they're not pro-life. They call themselves pro-life while acting anything but, and that was kind of my point. Okay. Let's see. Republicans practicing rich graft. Okay. Republicans consider their job. They do, though. They do. You're right about that, Ravaging Wolverine. They're the conservative party, right? But they're also the anti-government party. So their job is to make it so that government doesn't work, so that the people will vote to privatize it. I mean, that's generally what they exist. They also exist as a funnel to basically take taxpayer money and give it to corporations, give it to their donors. That's what's going on here. So, all right. How many people who contracted COVID during this crisis be considered uninsurable due to pre-existing conditions? All of them. I would assume so. I mean, you let these companies do that, that's exactly what's going to happen. Because they don't want to cover anyone to begin with, unless they're healthy. Okay. But they are the government, Yeah, that's the irony, of course. It's true. Let's move on here. Let's go to Jared Kushner.
We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we...
Hold on here. Let's get the right video.
We've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful.
All right, that is President Donald Trump's son, Jared Kushner, arguing that black people in poverty, well, I mean, you know, we can't force them to be successful. They have to want to be successful. Oh, okay. So here's what we're hearing from Jared Kushner, a man who was born quite wealthy, saying that, hey, man, black people, you've got a 100% even playing field to become successful. So, you know, you got to want it. You just got to want it. And that people, I mean, look, if you're not successful, then you never wanted it. Sorry. So, look, he's also arguing that Donald Trump's policies have made it materially better for black people in this country. Now, I'm not quite sure how giving trillions of dollars to the rich materially help poor black people, get them out of poverty. I don't quite know how that works. But, all right, if you want to talk about the black unemployment rate, all right, let's do that. So the black unemployment rate went down. Okay. That's generally a pretty good thing, right? Now, understand, though, that that's not a complete, comprehensive solution to black poverty. You see, having a black person get an extra job at McDonald's or, you know, wherever, right? Wherever they want it, wherever they get a job at. But I'm mainly saying people who are close to the poverty level, getting a job that pays minimum wage, well, that's not really going to help the community itself get out of poverty. It oftentimes won't even help the person who is working that job get out of poverty as well. Because if you're making $7.25 an hour, or if you're making $8 an hour, $9 an hour, whatever the going rate is, odds are, again, you're not really getting out of poverty and getting into something better. That's all I'm saying. So that said, right, what there needs to be in black communities is good jobs. In order for there to be good jobs, there needs to be investment into those communities. For example, in education, investment in black entrepreneurship in the forms of loans and grants. And look, what good does it do if banks will not lend to black entrepreneurs in inner cities? I mean, that's a good question that nobody seems to have an answer to. Because what we have is situations where banks will not loan to these people. And if they do, they end up loaning at higher interest rates than they would for white entrepreneurs. And so there's some serious barriers to black people being able to be successful. So it's not as easy as, well, you just got to want it. No. Look, I'm saying that there are barriers for poor white people too, of course. But there just happens to be more barriers and a long history of racist policies that have negatively impacted black people and black entrepreneurship and black ownership, okay? And so, look, we've had examples of black people being able to be very, very successful. For example, Black Wall Street. Now, what happened there? Well, look, they ended up building a lot of successful businesses, quite a bit of wealth, and then racist white people went and burned it down. That's what happened. And while something like that wouldn't happen today, you still have the impacts of all of those policies and a lot of lost ground to be made up. And I think targeting those communities with investment and aid would be a way to help even that playing field. Okay, so now Jared Kushner, in addition to completely lying about the black community and basically insinuating that they're all lazy, also claimed that the George Floyd protests were insincere, right? And also on all the people, all the black celebrities and sports players, you know, they were just virtue signaling. In fact, here's what he said, quote, "You saw a lot of people who were just virtue signaling. They would go on Instagram and cry or put a slogan on their jersey or write something on a basketball court. And quite frankly, that was doing more to polarize the country than it was to bring people forward." Wait, why would you think that saying like Black Lives Matter, for example, on your jersey or whatever would be somehow polarizing? It's not a political issue. Shouldn't be a political issue. Hey, let's not shoot unarmed black people should not be a political position. So the fact that Kushner looks at it as I can't believe you're playing politics, means that, well, you have successfully turned it into a political issue where now there's some sort of debate to be had on whether or not cops should be able to shoot unarmed black people with near impunity. I mean, how did we get into this? I know how we got into this. You have grifters, and you have people that spread this ridiculous message. And so, look, here's what they were doing. Kushner has a slight point. Were they virtue signaling? Yes. But by using the phrase virtue signaling, you are also virtue signaling to your base. Now, what they were saying, these black celebrities, in, you know, putting Black Lives Matter and all that stuff in their jerseys is, hey, we support this. We support this. Please don't shoot unarmed black people. Okay, great. I agree with that. If you're complaining about prominent black people virtue signaling, that maybe other black people shouldn't be killed by police. And by the way, Black Lives Matter has also come out in favor of police not shooting unarmed white people like Daniel Shaver, which they, of course, got themselves involved in that protest as well to protest Daniel Shaver's death. This, of course, was a man who had a pellet gun or a BB gun or something like that and was shot by a police officer. He didn't have the BB gun on him. It was in his hotel room, and he was crawling towards the officer saying, "Please don't shoot me, please don't shoot me, please don't shoot me," and reached back to pull up his pants and was shot and killed by a police officer. There's that case. Okay? And so here you had Black Lives Matter going and saying, hey, Daniel Shaver, not a black person, his life also mattered. So, I mean, that's a good example of how, you know, police officers, I mean, you didn't see All Lives Matter go and defend Daniel Shaver. You don't see All Lives Matter except unless it's to foil Black Lives Matter. And by the way, that's also where Blue Lives Matter comes in because they do the exact same thing. That said, Blue Lives Matter, definite virtue signaling. Absolutely. All Lives Matter, virtue signaling. So if you're going to complain about virtue signaling, why not stop doing your own? I don't necessarily think virtue signaling is a bad thing if you actually believe in it. Now, if you're somebody, again, who only virtue signals in order to, I don't know, try to grift your way into the community or into a group or whatever, then obviously that's a bad thing. But generally, virtue signaling is this, hey, I have this virtue. By the way, I'm also in favor of having of not having cops shoot unarmed black people. But again, Kushner, he's got this framed in that particular way. And so it is pretty ridiculous. He's pretty salty about it from what I could tell. But again, the question should be here is, what is somebody who was given everything in a silver platter, who basically is nothing more than a slumlord, know about getting black people out of poverty when he is one of the people who keeps black people, and not just black people, but anybody who stays in his buildings in poverty with excessive fees and all that stuff. I mean, come on. So let me go to some social media responses to this. John Favreau says, Jared Kushner's family connections provided him his only opportunities in life, and he still failed miserably at every single thing he's done. So perhaps it's Jared that doesn't want to be successful. I always love that because that's a great point. Jared Kushner is a lot like Donald Trump in the regard of he was given everything from birth and still manages to fuck it up. His latest investment was a building in New York that cannot make him any money, that he is going bankrupt on. And that he tried to use U.S. foreign policy to try to get loans for that building. Which seems like it's an ethical dilemma. Seems like it's something that's not exactly legal. And yet, for some reason, he has not been arrested for it. Maybe after the election. One would hope. There's more. Jason Kander says, Jared Kushner, son and husband of privilege, has a message for the black community. You would have more wealth if you just wanted it more. Just like him. Jimmy Craig says, this is coming from a guy whose family has made a fortune in low-income housing and gouging tenants with ridiculous service fees and late rent fees that keep their tenants perpetually broke. Again, like I said, Jared Kushner is a slumlord. Another one, a couple more here. One person says, weird that black people don't want to vote for someone like this. I know. It's amazing. Hakeem Jefferson says, of this I'm certain, the average black person in this country puts in more work by noon than Jared Kushner puts in a whole damn day. Yes, especially people, by the way, you ever seen a McDonald's worker work? They work hard. They do. In fact, people that, work in the grocery stores, they stock shelves, they, take the items off the truck, they sort things. They work harder than people like Jared Kushner and Donald Trump work in their entire lives. Regular workers work harder. And we get sold this myth that the United States, if you only worked hard, you would make more money. That is not true at all. Because if that were true, then the poorest workers today would be the millionaires and billionaires of tomorrow. Never seems to work. I wonder why they continue to sell us that lie. Maybe it's because it's profitable. All right, a couple more here. Benji Sarlin says, closing message to people crying after watching a human being slowly killed on camera. We're faking it for likes is another interesting move. Yes. Oh, you were really upset about George Floyd, crying for his mother. No. You were just virtue signaling, for clicks. Now, it sounds like something that Jared Kushner would do because he appears to have no empathy or human emotion whatsoever. And finally, look, can you know what? Can we all just agree that at this point, not only is Jared Kushner deeply, deeply ignorant, but super gross as a person as well? And here's the thing. Ignorance can be cured, but this kind of mentality, this kind of stuff, no. You can't cure that. He's a gross person and will always be a gross person. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back. We've got a Republican voter that's going to be rather honest about why she supports Donald Trump. Still, after everything that has come out about him. And I'll show you that video after this break, and then we're going to talk about what would have stopped the economic pain that is here in America. So stay right here. We'll come back around the nation.
we've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat.
I'm in trouble.
Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
Wait, you're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so apologies for this super long break. I'm working on getting Francesca Fiorentini on the show. So I was working on that. That's going to be awesome. So stay tuned for the announcement of when that's going to be. All right, so that said, also I want to thank some patrons as well as some channel members here. Let's see. So channel members here. I want to thank Christine Rowe and Frances Haspil, and I can't see the rest of that. Because of course. Haspil Dory. Sorry. All right. Thank you for doing that, for signing up to become a channel member. Also, patrons here, let's get over to that. I want to thank Vicky D and Robin Little. So thank you for signing up to support independent progressive media as such as it is. All right, anyway. Let's move on here. Let's go to The next story, we've got Trump supporters. We've got a Trump supporter being honest. If it's one thing Republican voters say that they hate, it's fake news. The irony, of course, is that fake news is literally all they consume, and they can't seem to realize it. In fact, recently a Pennsylvania voter talked to ABC News and admitted why she supports President Donald Trump, and it's because of the quote-unquote research she has done on social media. Take a look.
I would say everything. All his policies I agree with 100%.
About 10 miles west of Philadelphia, 60-year-old Tanya Seletsky is the kind of enthusiastic supporter the Trump campaign hopes will prevail in this must-win state. Is there anything over the last 4 years that has given you pause about Donald Trump?
I would say no at this point, because when I'm researching what he does say, there's facts backing it up. I see social media. I'm very active on social media. So I do my research. Things that he brings up are exactly what me and my friends talk about in our kitchen. When we're sitting around having drinks and talking about politics and government, he's exactly spot on.
You might want to dial back on your drinks just a little bit. That's all I'm saying. Like, you might want to put down the Kool-Aid and actually look at some real facts. So look, I love this, right? It's like, oh, I did my research. I went to the Facebook page. Donald Trump is amazing and awesome and is never wrong. And I found out that everything that Donald Trump says is 100% correct. Research. I did my research. No, that's not research. Okay. If you're only looking at propaganda sources, then you're not getting the facts. You're not getting factual information. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. Okay. These people have no idea that what they look at is literally fake news. And it's not, and look, I'm not saying like if it has a conservative bias, it's fake. That's not what I'm saying here, right? No, if you have a conservative perspective, but we agree on the facts, let me give you a quick example, right? Climate change, right? So there's a conservative perspective on climate change of saying, okay, look, climate change is a problem, but what we're going to do is we're going to incentivize corporations by giving them tax breaks and all this stuff in order to have them innovate and decarbonize themselves, right? And that's technically more of like the Democratic position, but it just shows you how kind of screwed our politics are, because the Republican position is doesn't exist. Fake news. Climate change. What climate change? Climate has always been changing. So, but I'm saying, like, that's an actual conservative perspective, allowing the businesses to innovate and come up with their own thing. A progressive perspective is saying, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to nationalize the oil industry and then shut it down and then replace it with solar panels. And that's it. We're going to do a massive jobs program, et cetera, right? But that's an example of, like, the conversation that you could have from a conservative perspective and still adhere to factual information. As you could tell, we do not live in that world. And so what happens in Republican world is they make up things and then spread it to everyone else. And I don't mean everyone else just as like rando people, right? Even though they do have a role in sharing it. But first, one or two sites they'll come up with an idea, they'll come up with a talking point, and then they will go and spread it around to the other outlets. A lot of these other outlets are paid by the same kind of billionaires, Koch brothers, who would be negatively impacted by climate change regulations and legislation. And so they go and do this narrative that, no, we must deregulate because climate change is not actually a thing. It's not really happening. And liberals just want to control your life. And so we'll spread it around to all our little satellite networks and all our little satellite outlets and the people that we pay in order to spread this propaganda so that there is the appearance of a national outrage and so that politicians will not actually pay attention to climate change because they'll think, well, our constituents all believe that climate change is a hoax, and so what are we going to do? And that's really simplified of what's going on. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's kind of what happens, okay? And so in the interim, though, you've got these outlets on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., that will go and they will make things up for clicks. So in order to reinforce that bias, and also for, money from these large think tanks, these, that are funded by these big giant corporations in order to sow doubt. Again, we know for a fact that ExxonMobil knew about climate change. And I know climate change is something I keep going back to. There are numerous examples of other things, but climate change is probably one of the clearest examples of this because ExxonMobil knew about this. Their scientists were warning in-house, like, hey, climate change is real. Maybe we should do something about it. And what we have to do is reduce our own emissions. And the company said, yeah, good for you. We're not going to do that. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to go and lie about this. And we're also going to pay think tanks to go out there and muddy the water so that we don't actually have to do anything. And that's really it. Now, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, Donald Trump is A, not a smart person. B, has never met a conspiracy theory that he didn't agree with. And C, lies about everything, not just about politics. He has been a committed liar throughout his entire, I could say, lifetime. Okay, this is long before he got into politics. You guys remember back when he was during 2012, where Donald Trump was like, Obama, I got people in Hawaii. We're looking for the birth certificate. We're going to find it. We got an investigation going on. He was one of the the OG birther people that really brought it to the forefront. And of course, Republicans who were desperate and hated Obama immediately glommed onto it. Conspiracy theories. So not only is he lying, but has a history of lying, but he has a history of spreading conspiracy theories as well, as Bernie Sanders calls him, a pathological liar. And he's absolutely right. And so, again, interestingly enough, Donald Trump lies about things that he doesn't even have to lie about. I mean, things that don't even make sense. But again, that goes to the pathological nature. But these pages, these so-called sources that these conservatives go to that basically reaffirm their own biases, well, again, they're operated either by grifters or sometimes even by foreign actors. They'll spread around fake stories. They'll amplify it. They'll amplify fake news, like, for example, Pizzagate, QAnon, and they just mislead people. And that's it. And if that's where you get their research, well, then of course you're going to love somebody like Donald Trump. Why? Because he's the only one that's out there fighting the pedophile Democrats who are trying to destroy the country and, killed your children and he's the only one that's going to try to stop them from harvesting your kids' adrenochrome. I mean, it's just complete and utter insanity. They think that people are literally drinking fear from children. I mean, it's crazy. If you're at that point, you're gone. There's no coming back from the QAnon. I mean, it's very, very rare that people escape from what is essentially the cult. Okay? And that's the thing. The part about that's so insidious about this entire thing, all of this, fake news stuff, is that there is a kernel of truth that they use to try to push away factual information. Okay? Because old news, I'm going to shock everybody, right? Every news agency has a bias. They have a perspective. Let me be honest. Let me start with me. My perspective is progressive. I'm a progressive. My point of reference comes from the lens of being a progressive person, right? And so, yes, what I do is that I try to offer my perspective on the news, on the facts. What I do not do is try to twist the facts to fit my own narrative. And so that's the problem, okay? I don't invent things out of whole cloth. The problem is that there are people who do. And the problem is that there are people who do twist the facts to try to fit their narrative and try to fit their own bias. And so, and the funny thing is the more somebody says, and this is kind of a tell, this is kind of a flag, right? The more people say, everyone else has a bias, but we don't. We're the only ones out here that tell the truth. That's a gigantic red flag. And usually that tends to show you that those are usually the ones that are going to lie to you the most. Okay? Don't worry, we're not going to lie to you. No, we're only here telling the truth. And we're so glad you're here listening to us. Everyone else is fake news. And by the way, did you know Hillary Clinton's a lizard person and wants to eat your baby? I mean, that's exactly what it's like. There is that kernel of truth that there is bias in the news, and that sometimes they do tell things that are not necessarily 100% true, or they have their own perspective that colors their narrative. Again, I could point out the tons of examples of corporate news saying false things about Bernie Sanders, for example, during the presidential primary, and running smear articles. I get it. There is that kernel of truth. But at the same time, you've got these right-wing sites that are all over that are taking this to an extreme. And unfortunately, this is a result. Oh, I believe everything Donald Trump says because, quote unquote, the facts back him up. In reality, they don't. And and let me also be clear. I'm not saying that the left doesn't also dabble in a little bit of conspiracy. There's a little bit. I'll be honest about that. Look, you could say that some of the anti-vax stuff came from bougie liberals. Okay? Now it seems to be like a little bit more bipartisan now. And a lot of it stems from distrust of corporations, at least, when it comes from the left. Sometimes that is also bipartisan. Still bullshit. Please vaccinate your kids. That said, this is an example. This person is an example of somebody who's right-wing that I think has gone too far. You're not going to be able to reach her and pull her back. All right? And again, part of that is due to media illiteracy, the lack of a fairness doctrine. You've got massive distrust in corporate media, which I completely understand, but also, and this is important because I've covered this before, you have these large platforms like Facebook, for example, that prioritized conservative media over liberal media, over progressive media. And so, again, a lot of these right-wing pages, Daily Wire, for example, I believe they are a fact checker on Facebook, have made up stories. And so there is that issue. Okay, they do peddle in misinformation, and yet they are being pushed by the algorithm, signed off 100% by Zuckerberg. And so that is an issue. They're prioritized over progressives, and so even center-left, outlets like Mother Jones get affected, and the algorithm literally favors things like, until recently, QAnon, which just recently got banned. Now, the problem with that is that after it was a massive backlash, they removed it, and that just gives these conspiracy theorists more ammunition to say, oh, look at that. See, I can't believe Facebook would censor the truth. I think the best way to put a stop to this is early. Not let the algorithm push it in the first place. But now, unfortunately, genie's out of the bottle. You can't put it back in. Not easily, at least. And so I think this is a real problem. And I think the only way to beat people like this is to nullify their vote at the election, at the polls. Show up. Beat them. We outnumber them. We do. People who have common sense do outnumber them. And we actually have to show up. And I know it sucks to vote for Joe Biden, but you kind of got to do that in order to defeat a president who is insane and get somebody who maybe doesn't lie quite as much about ridiculous, horrible things. And maybe, I don't know, we'll push a COVID package and might actually sign some kind of decent policy once in a while. Basically, it's got to be better than what we have right now. And they're not going to support things like QAnon, which are patently, obviously true or untrue. Okay? Completely, utterly untrue garbage and fake news. Okay? All right. Let's move on. One more. Let's do one more here. This could take a while. Who's pushing Tim Pool? Let's see. Do I have too much? No, I have very little faith in Biden. That's very little faith. All right. As the economic situation in the United States continues to deteriorate as a result of the coronavirus crisis, a new study has come out to basically remind us about how we could have avoided some of the worst economic harm by actually sending the American people money. I know this is going to be a big shock to most of you who have seen this before, but it turns out that researchers at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia recently wrote a new study that if every employed American had just received or continued receiving the $600 from the CARE Act, along with, of course, the economic impact payment or the stimulus, the $1,200 stimulus, that, you know, a lot of people would have avoided falling into poverty. Again, shocker, right? So now, more specifically getting into the numbers here, it turns out that had we continued doing that, they estimated that about 125,000 households would still be behind on their payments when it comes to rent by December. That is, of course, people who did not get stimulus and who did not qualify for those unemployment benefits. So look, let's be honest. Would they have been absolutely helpful? Yes, the study absolutely shows that. Did we do enough on coronavirus? No, we did not. We should have had at least a $2,000 stimulus per month, stimulus payment per adult per month, for the duration of the crisis, of course, rent and mortgage moratoriums, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That said, this is the bare minimum, and our government has failed to provide the bare minimum, which has led to a current 1.3 million households that are currently behind on their rent. 1.3 million households. Compared to if we just had continued those very modest payments of $600 a week in additional unemployment benefits, we would only have 125,000 people who would be behind on the rent right now. Now, there are even more numbers to this. So now, 1.3 million households is about 4.2% of all renter households. So that might not be a lot, but that's going to actually have a large impact, especially when you look at the numbers. So now these people who are unfortunate enough to be behind in their rent payments, who at the moment, in a lot of places, still cannot be evicted. But even though they've racked up all this, this rent, and in fact, it was about a total of $7.2 billion in unpaid back rent that is owed by this 4.2%. How are they ever going to pay that? They're not. They're not. If you couldn't afford to pay that rent during the crisis, it is very likely that you're not going to be able to afford it as soon as the crisis is considered over. All right? You are in way too much of a hole. You're screwed. You're screwed. And so that's what's going on. Now, we could have avoided this, but instead, we did not. So now that's about, by the way, per household broken down, that $7.2 billion, that's about $5,400 per household in back rent. And that doesn't even, I think that doesn't even include some of the more expensive places to rent. For example, New York, Manhattan, California, or I should say LA, portions of LA where you have, for a very small apartment, $2,000 to $3,000 a month for rent. So this is really, really bad. And by the way, it's not just bad news for renters. It is bad news for renters. It's terrible. But you also have landlords who can't make their mortgage payments. And so that goes up the chain. And this is not good. Very bad. And so this could have all been avoided, by the way, had Congress acted on COVID relief, which they did not. It's been over 160 days since Congress passed the CARES Act, which provided the $600 payments and that stimulus check, which researchers said was actually quite effective. The researchers writing this paper wrote, policies designed to replace lost income for unemployed workers have been very effective at preventing rental debt for households that receive them. It almost seems like, yeah, no shit, we give people money and they're gonna pay them bills. What do they think? Like Republicans do Republicans think that people, if we gave them money, we're just gonna like buy drugs or hookers? I mean, that's what you would do, Republican congressman. But like the American people are way smarter than you give them credit for. And so, I mean, honestly, what did you think? I don't know, but we do know 100% that they were against, those unemployment benefits. In fact, what was it? I remember Lindsey Graham talking about how we're not going to continue that $600 not rent increase, that $600 unemployment benefit over his dead body. Well, unfortunately, Lindsey Graham's still alive. Sad. And now we have millions of Americans facing eviction as the national moratorium for evictions is going to end at the end of 2020. And so that's going to be very, very bad. But look, here's the thing. So their main argument was, well, if you give them that $600, then they're not going to go back to work. First of all, that's not how unemployment works. If you're called back to work, you don't get unemployment. You refuse a job offer, you don't get unemployment anymore. And by the way, some Republicans will be like, well, I mean, they're just going to say that they're afraid of COVID. Yeah, because COVID is a pandemic, and people who are, immunocompromised have a legitimate fear of getting COVID because it could kill them. I'm just saying, like, okay. But again, you want people to stay home for a while, to not work and not spread the virus. That's the whole point. The whole point was to contain the virus. And it feels like what little lockdown that we did, right, was basically just a waste of time. What we're doing now, for one, it's not working. We actually have more cases now than before we had locked down. So what was the point of locking down? If we're not going to mask up, if we weren't going to do it long enough to make a difference. It's like we did it for a couple of weeks, and sent out the paychecks. And I was like, you know what? We're tired of this. We're not going to do it anymore. We don't really care. Get back to work. Too late now. This is a gigantic mess. And we're not getting out of this mess. And that sucks. And so now let's get to some of the facts about the unemployment, right? Workers facing larger expansions of unemployment benefits have returned to their previous jobs over a time at a similar rate than others, according to the economists at Yale University, who found no evidence that the $600 weekly jobless benefits led people working less. In fact, they said, we find no evidence that more generous benefits disincentivize work at either the onset or the expansion as firms look to return to business over time. That was the main talking point that they used, and it was wrong. It's just not true. There's literally no reason not to support that $600 benefit unless you feel, and I said no legitimate reason, right? This is their illegitimate reason. They feel that you're not worthy of getting that money. That's the conservative mindset in a nutshell. They do not think that working Americans deserve aid. They don't think that. That's why everything they propose provides the vast majority of aid to corporations, to the rich. Because to them, they already have money, so they are more worthy of getting help. And now, if you don't have money, then you're not worthy of help. You're just not. You're not worthy of this money. In fact, you're a bad person. You're an immoral person. It goes back to the Calvinist mindset that a lot of these Republicans have, that if you're poor, you earned being poor because you're a bad person, and therefore we're not going to help you. We're not going to help you. And again, these are good people, hardworking people, who, by the way, couldn't afford a $400 emergency before the pandemic. There's about 40% of America could not afford a $400 emergency because the economy had basically left them behind. Wages have not risen fast enough or in proportion to productivity. And so we're more productive than ever before, and yet we're not paid for it. All of that money's got to go somewhere. It went right to the top. And those same people at the top are saying that we don't deserve that $600 benefit. We don't deserve any sort of government help because that is bad socialism. And by the way, you're just going to be lazy and waste the money. You're going to waste the money. Well, what are you doing? You're wasting the money. Our money. And that's the problem. And that's unfortunately who Republicans are. They believe that the vast majority of the American people are lazy and terrible people who don't deserve anything. And I should say that they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. Facts disprove them all the time. And maybe we need to stop voting for Republicans. All right. That's all I got for you today on this. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like, share the stream. Dango Bango with a great point here in the super chat. Says even monarchs knew to take care of their workers. Well, I mean, it depends on where you're at. If you're in France, if you don't take care of your workers, you get the guillotine. So, I don't know. Maybe it's something to consider. Bringing back some of the old hits. Just saying. All right. Yeah. That's all I got for you on the news front. Maybe later tonight, I'll try to do a video game stream for y'all. So I know most of you, I don't know if I'm doing them too late. I don't know. But I do, like to do the gaming stuff, play some video games and chat with you all. And I want to try to do that a little bit more often, as I keep saying. And I'd like to have you come and join me for that. So, all right. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see y'all later.
Please clap.
Tighten up my knee. I like my knee tight.
Wet ass keyword.
Silence.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.